it was a very difficult thing for my parents, especially.
Both children.
Yeah, especially then that both their children converted to Islam.
Yeah.
But you know, at first their reaction was really negative. I was disowned twice and taken back.
My family is Italian by culture, not born in Italy, but grew up in America. And they feel threatened, they feel offended that I chose to live my life in a way different than the way they raised me. They take it as an offense because they feel like we raised you this way. Why would you want any other way? Are you saying that how we raised you is not good enough and you had to find something else?
My family was a bit confused at first, but after the initial shock, everyone's been pretty accepting of it. I think being at a university especially is good because it's the kind of community that's more open to diversity and things of that nature. So that really, I think, helped me along the way.
I was coming from a belief in nothing. So for my parents, they saw positive changes in my lifestyle and positive changes in my emotional state. So I think they were probably happy, but I know they were scared.
I lost a lot of people who I thought were friends over things that weren't necessarily specifically religious things, but when you become Muslim, like, your life habits change. You know, I used to drink, now I don't drink. You know, I found a lot of the people that I thought were friends were really just drinking buddies.
Friends that I'd had before I became Muslim, friends that mattered, really became very interested. So, and everyone else sort of dropped off. So I think it was really a test for who was a true friend.
The American public, they are generally very decent people, and that's why I chose to be here, because they are very open, they are very generous. There is a lot of good in America.
It's much easier to be a Muslim here than to be in a Muslim country, for example, because the ambiance here is certainly not Islamic. So you have to work harder at yourself, so you have to create a premium on yourself, so exert yourself in greater ways than you would have had you been in a Muslim country where you take things for granted. Here you wouldn't take things for granted.
It was very difficult in the beginning because the language was different, the way people lived was different, the whole culture was different. The things that we took as normal were totally abnormal here. And but over time, I think America is a wonderful country. And the wonderful thing about it is that people from any culture, any background, Americans are very, very accepting.
Being at home, being under, the umbrella of your family and, the way you're brought up, and to have that understanding at home that this is who you are, and then to walk outside your door and the whole world having a completely different culture.
Being in this country, you have to, whatever you do kind of is representative of, people will take that as a representation of all the Muslims, in the world.
Some people completely take on this culture as their own and become indistinguishable other than, what you see on their face. But there's also, I would say, a significant proportion that comprise the middle ground that keep strong Islamic values.
It has been a bit difficult, especially after 9/11, where unfortunately people view Muslims in a negative way. So it has been tough.
I had a friend visit me over the weekend, and she was just saying, why are Muslims so bad? Why is Islam so bad?
At times I feel like I'm always on the defense about Islam, even though, and you're always trying to justify to other people.
I remember after 9/11, I was entering my freshman year of college, and I remember being in defense mode.
They do openly discriminate, where we were the only Muslim couple on the plane, and Brian was the only Muslim male, and he was the only one searched. And yet it's a random search.
Right after 9/11 happened, I guess he didn't know I was Muslim, and he's talking to his friends, and we all know each other, and he says to his friend, all Arabs should go to concentration camps. And I was or all Muslims, all Arabs, so I don't know what he said. And I was why would you say that? Like, we had nothing to do with it. You can't have, like, one person's actions, like, determine, like, the fate of, like, everyone in that group and stuff. It's, like, a bad representation. And he was like, no, they really should. They have to go no matter what. I was like, well, do you know that I'm Arab? And what did I do? I did nothing. I didn't contribute to it. And so he just kind of stood by his word, even though you could tell by his expression afterwards that I said, like, when I said I was Arab, he felt bad and he knew he shouldn't have said that and stuff. But he still had to stick with his word, and I put up a good argument.
I work at Macy's, and one day it was inventory day, and we were working on, I was working in the clothes department, so I met a new employee there, and we were folding clothes and just discussing generally, and he was telling me about his travels to Europe, and so I told him about that I've been to Europe as well, and then I mean, the conversation was going like a normal conversation. I didn't identify myself as a Muslim, but then I told him that he told me he's been to Israel, and so I asked him about the situation there, and then I told him I'm a Muslim, and for a moment he looked startled, and then suddenly he told me, you know, but you're so nice.
So I think the public in general thinks that, you know, all Muslims are from, you know, Iraq or Saudi Arabia or one of those Middle Eastern countries, when in reality only about 20% of the Muslim population is Arabic.
The most Muslims are Indonesians. Statistically, that's the largest group, and you know, it's Pakistani, and they're just all over the world. So there's a lot of just a lot of cultural stereotypes regarding Muslims.
Just about women in Islam in general, I think by some non-Muslims who don't know that much about Islam, they might think that by women having to cover themselves and wearing the scarf, the hijab, that women are limited in what they can do.
The main misconception I feel is about women, that women are mistreated in Islam. There's a lot of misconceptions about that women are somehow less than men, or considered to be less than men in Islam. There's a lot of confusion with the hijab, I've noticed, that at the outset seems to define women by non-Muslim women, or I found more with non-Muslim women than with non-Muslim men, that women seem to think that you're setting back the women's movement 50 years, or that you're somehow lessening the status of women.
Wearing a scarf, they really do seem to think that I am the suppressed kind of woman who, you know, has to, just the typical Afghanistan kind of thing.
If they only knew the real situation.
That's to the extent that, you know, if I say, yes, I kept my maiden name, they're very shocked. It's like, oh, your husband would allow this. And it's an Islamic practice. Taking your husband's name is a Christian practice. It's not an Islamic practice, for example. When I was working, I often have to answer questions about why I cover my head, and I explain, you know, it's so people see me as a person for my thoughts and ideas rather than as a sexual being.
I think recently people associate Islam with terrorism.
There is no terrorism in Islam. You know, there are lots of verses in the Quran that condemns terrorism. And but there are certain people with political agendas, and they are speaking on behalf of Muslims.
I mean, if you take the Israel-Palestine, you know, example, you know, they think that, you know, Muslims are just angry, you know, bitter people who are, you know, rock throwers.
It hurts that people think of you like that, but we know that Muslims and Islam does not represent terrorism.
And it's up to Muslims actually to stand up and speak for their own faith and for what they really believe in. And I think if the truth comes out, particularly in the United States, I think you'll find many people have a better appreciation of Islam than Muslims.